The opinions expressed on the Simone Edwards Show by our guest are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of KEPXradio.com, its owner, and or the Simone Edwards Show and those affiliated with it. In no event will the Simone Edwards Show, KEPXradio.com, its owners, guests, hosts, or affiliates be liable for the information disseminated on the program, including, without limitation, any loss or damage, indirect or otherwise, arising from information presented on the show. We trust you are of legal age and will consult appropriate professionals prior to employing any opinions expressed on the show. Many of the topics discussed are personal in nature, and some people may disagree with the opinions expressed on the show. We are open to your constructive criticism and or ideas for future radio programs. Please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. And we are back here in studio with the Nears of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries. We are going to be continuing part 2 of the top 10 biggest complaints about marriage. So we want to get you caught up. So we're going to pick up a little bit where we left off last time and then segue into the rest. We left off with intimacy. And when we were talking about intimacy, one of the things that Adrienne prefaced that I thought was really important is that we weren't just talking about physical intimacy, which is good for marriage. And we'll touch on that in just a little bit. We were also talking about emotional intimacy and how important it is to create that emotional intimacy. As always, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we're going to make sure that we tackle this subject on both sides of the aisle. We're not going to adhere to stereotypes. Women don't always talk their heads off and men aren't always quiet and shut down. So we want to make sure that we approach both sides of the aisle so that we can help you to build a lasting marriage, a marriage that's built with love and fidelity and trust and open communication. So we're going to have the Nears kick it off. I'm going to kick the ball to who wants to take it. We're going to talk about intimacy, and they're both pointing at each other. So I'm going to talk to you about intimacy. I know nothing. All right. So Kenneth, share with us the importance of intimacy in the marital relationship.
Well, intimacy is a closeness between one person and another person. So, and you have to have intimacy, and intimacy is togetherness, attachment, affection, familiarity, and a longing to be with.
Okay.
So you long to be with that person, affectionate with the person, learn the familiarities with the person, with your, wife or your spouse or, however, in a relationship. Because we're talking about marriage, but even in a relationship, you have to get the intimacy in your relationship.
I really like that. And one of the things, it's funny because, and I'm going to segue just a little bit into the physical intimacy part of it. And, we're going to keep it PG. All right. So a lot of times when you think of marriage and intimacy, a lot of times I think that couples don't realize that the more they spend time together and the more that they build up the emotional intimacy, the intellectual intimacy, the more that they create that bond, the easier the segue is to the physical part versus, okay, let's just start the car cold in 0-degree weather and, it hasn't been warmed up at all. And it's like, okay, well, let's go. Right. So from a female perspective, Adrienne, talk to us about how important is it to build up that emotional intimacy with your spouse?
From a woman's point of view, men are different. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they can get things going a whole lot faster than a woman, but a woman has to be emotionally touched first.
Right. And
emotionally touching her first actually just starts out, I think, very simply on that man. If your spouse wants to spend time with you, connecting with you during the day.
Right.
A nice text message or even a selfie of them or a phone call, even a note in the morning. My husband does things like help me to the car. It's the little things to the women that really, really matter.
Right.
And another thing that keeps continuous intimacy in the relationship is spending that time with one another. And that's one of the things we always encourage is date night. And you set those boundaries with that date night and make sure that you are connecting and talking about those things in the relationship that are important, not the bills. Not saying that bills aren't important, not saying that your children are not important, but giving that time to one another. And you're talking about how we're going to spend maybe our next date night. Hold hands. Make sure you're holding hands and touching. Tell that crazy joke that makes no sense to nobody but the two of you.
Right.
So those things are really important. And also being able to pray together creates a very, very high level of intimacy. It also increases your trust and your security that that person is always going to be there and they care about you more than just your than just the physical part of you. So it lets them know that emotionally you are being secure. And women, we always need to feel like we are secure in our relationship. We know that we want to know that that man is going to be there. So it's really important on their end to feed into us emotionally in those ways before they attempt to go into the more physical part of it. The more physical part of it is the ultimate of what has already happened.
Correct.
So it leads into that and it makes it a lot easier, and the woman is more adapt to be more of a participant.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. What I want to ask you, Kenneth, is from the male perspective, because we want to address this issue about emotional intimacy from both sides, right? Because so often we can think, okay, women want the emotional part and men just want the physical, and we can bypass the fact that men have emotions. They want to be connected with, not just physically. Their trust, their confidence needs to be protected. So talk to the women about how to create that emotional intimacy within their relationship with their spouses and not fall into the trap of the stereotype that men don't get emotional.
Well, men are emotional. I mean, lots of times they just don't show it,
Right.
but they are. But intimacy time is a time that a man does not really want to hear any complaints. You know, don't want to hear nothing about the dishes, or you didn't get this done, or that didn't get done, or, you know, you just want that quality time. You just want to be able to minister or have intimacy with your wife. But you don't, you know, there are times that complaints come up during that time, but that they really should not.
Okay.
Because that's a real important time in your marriage, you know, for bonding. You know, so complaints are, you know, that's a man's biggest problem is, you know, he hears complaints during that time, and that's not when he wants to hear a complaint.
So is this leading up to the physical aspect, or just when they're emotionally connecting?
Both.
Okay.
Both, because even getting to that point, you just don't want to hear complaints or anything like that. You want to hear mainly all positive.
Okay.
From your wife, you know, positive, nothing negative, you know, because things negative at that time tend to turn you the other way.
So what are some things that a woman can say to build up her husband? And I know that every couple is different. Every couple has their own fingerprint. So we can't say that, oh, okay, everybody likes Play-Doh, so we're going to, but just as a overall, to kind of spark imagination, to spark thought, to make them think, I never thought about that before. What are some things that a woman can say that will build up that level of intimacy in the relationship with her husband?
Well, one thing is appreciation, because men are huge with that, you know. They'll go the last 9 yards, they'll go however far they have to, but just as long as you appreciate them. That's what they're looking for. Appreciation and don't disrespect me. Those are the two biggest things with men.
Okay, here's what I want to touch on because I see Adrienne about to lean in. So, woo, it's going to get good in here. Feel my help coming. We hear don't disrespect, right? And it's a huge issue. Men love your wives, women respect your husband. What does a man consider? And again, each man is different, but in a global generalization, what do men consider disrespect? What are some things that are considered disrespectful in the relationship?
Well, I guess kind of when you talked over, you know, when you're in conversation, listen. The husband, man wants to be listened to.
Okay.
Just listen to me. Don't cut me off. Don't talk over me. Let me speak. And I mean, it may take a man a little longer than it does a woman, but give me the time, to let me speak and express myself. Because I can express myself. A lot of times women think, well, you don't express. Yes, I can. But just wait for me to do it, and I'll get there. I'll get it done.
That's really good. That's actually really good. Because and I'm using purely, for lack of a better word, scientific terminology. One of the things that psychologists have put out there is that women, we use more words than men throughout the course of a day, and our verbal abilities, our ability to communicate is a whole lot stronger than most men. So, Adrienne, weigh in because I'm seeing the look. Oh my God, we need to video. I'm seeing a look. Come on in.
Okay, I know one of the things that that we always touch on is knowing what his love language is.
Okay, that's good.
And when you learn what their love language is, you are more adept to satisfy your spouse more. If their love language is words of appreciation or words of affirmation, then you know that that's what's going to make him feel good and feel good about himself. For lack of a better term, Big Daddy. Some that just builds them all up. I'm just big and I'm going, I got the world, or I can handle anything. All of a sudden, I'm Hercules. So sometimes those things are what men like to hear. And always thank you.
Okay.
Always appreciate what they do. Even though marriage is a partnership, it's a team, men like to hear, whether feel like it's their job or not, team, thank you for washing the dishes. Thank you for helping me with that. I appreciate it. Those little things go a long, long ways with men. And likewise, women, we like to hear some things too, and definitely words of appreciation. But for men, they need a little bit more of that stroking that kind of builds them up more. Right. I know one thing that my husband does is he sends out exhortations, and he sends them out by text message, and he's come such a long way. When we first started out, he was not phone savvy, wasn't up to date, and I let him know I appreciate how far you have come with this,
right.
And I appreciate those words of encouragement that you send out that day,
right.
To me and to probably about 10 or 15 different people receive those words of encouragement. And I let him know I appreciate that. I mean, it means a lot to me, and sometimes those words are good for myself to hear.
That's really good. That's here's one of the things we're going to talk about when we come back, because this intimacy thing, I mean, you guys keep talking, it's like the Pandora box or the lotus flower just keeps opening up. One of the things that you brought up was Gary Chapman. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking of another author, and I wanted to make sure I got it right. It's Gary Chapman, and he has a book called The 5 Love Languages. And one of the things about intimacy is we can tend to sometimes get into a place where we think it's add water, get intimacy.
Right.
stick it in the microwave, push 30 seconds. All right, here comes the intimacy. Woo, baby, let's go. All right, you ready to go to the bedroom? That kind of thing. But what I'm hearing as I'm listening to you and the thoughts that are coming to my mind is that if you really want to have intimacy blossom in your relationship, you're going to have to take the time to educate yourself.
Yes.
You're going to have to take the time. So we want to touch on that when we come back. We will be back in just a few moments with the Nears of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries, and we're going to keep riding this horse of intimacy until we get to the very end. We are talking about the 10 biggest complaints in marriage, and we have been, for those of you who are just now tuning in, we've been talking about intimacy, developing that emotional intimacy, that physical closeness that will lead to, the ultimate expression of love. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to become a guest on the Simone Edwards Show? Well, please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
And we are back here in studio with the Nears of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries. When we last left off, we were talking about intimacy and how it's not this add water, get immediate intimacy, and that it is going to take some effort and some work in researching and finding out about your partner. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about the importance of doing research, just like you would for your job, doing research on your partner so that you can create that intimacy.
It's really important as to educate yourself so that you know and you learn other things and other ways to get to know your spouse. You want to have that creativity in your relationship. That's how you get to know them and see what they respond well to. And one example is in our house when I was growing up, I never saw my parents ever raise their voices at one another or anything like that. So when you go into your marriage, if your spouse has a tendency to raise their voice, that's going to be an immediate shutdown.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point.
So those are things that you need to educate yourself on so that you do not run into these situations with them, because and keeping in mind that as you're going down this road, is it going to be perfect? No. Are you going to do some things that's going to irritate them? Of course. But learn from those things and don't continue to push those same buttons in that relationship because you already know what your ending result is going to be. So it's important to educate yourself. Pay attention to what your spouse is doing. Another example is even when me and my husband were dating, and I didn't even realize that when I'm full, I start moving my food around on my plate. And he figured that out. He's like, she must be full. So, I get to eat her food. So that was one thing that he was very observant to what I was doing, whether it was for his benefit, in this case for his benefit and not so much mine, but that was letting me know that this man does pay attention. He's paying attention to what I do.
That's good.
And how I do it. So it's really important to observe, educate, and communicate.
I really, really like that. Kenneth, did you have anything to add? Because, man, I have a whole bunch of questions. They're on the flight deck.
No, like my wife was saying, I tend to watch and listen, and lots of times with reactions, you can tell if that went over well or if it did not go over well, because if you get a silent from, something that you say, most time that didn't go over well.
Right.
But if you get a response of talking or some kind of gesture, then it tends to it did go over well. But most times silence means that it didn't go over very well.
Okay.
You know, so you just watch, and you listen, and if you watch, you will be able to pick up things. And if you listen, you will be able to pick up things. You'll get a ear to be able to be in tune to your spouse, husband or wife. That ear will come. You'll be able to get in tune. And if you watch, you can start to learn body languages and hand motions and stuff. And because I can tell when she's done with a conversation, she'll turn and start staring. So that means that she's done. If her head goes up, that means she's not done. So you just watch and you listen. And you'll be able to pick up things.
That's actually really good, because here's the thing that keeps coming to my mind. I have two things, and I don't want to forget them, so I need you guys to tag me, okay? The first one is familiarity breeding contempt, and then the other part is protecting intimacy. Those are the two things that are on the flight deck. The first one is, there's a saying that says familiarity breeds contempt. And in listening to the two of you talk, it's almost like you have to shatter that wall of, I know you, no, I know you, and so now I don't have to put in the effort. And what I'm hearing is a sense of always observe, always pay attention to your spouse, because the more you pay attention to them, the more you'll learn who they are. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
Yes.
correct. But we are forever changing.
I love that you said that. Yes.
We're forever changing.
Yes.
And we go through different phases and cycles in our lives all the time.
Right.
So it's not that you're going to get bored observing.
Right.
Because you're going to always be learning that person.
Right.
When we get older now, he's learning how to deal with hot flashes.
Right.
So it's always something else to learn about that individual and to observe about them, because we are forever changing. We're not the same.
Right.
And as well as with him, he is not the same. He used to stay up a little bit later. He's ready to go to sleep at a certain time. Head hit the pillow and he's out. So we're forever learning how things change with us, even in the way we are physically, how we are mentally,
Right.
and how we are emotionally. All of these things are always evolving. Is it always positive? No. But good. Change is good.
And I love that you said that, though, because that's where the whole familiarity breeds contempt. Because if you go into it thinking, I got you, Joe knows Susie and Susie knows Joe. Well, the problem is the Joe that you knew 5 years ago is a whole new Joe. You haven't been paying attention. The Susie that you knew 5 years ago is a brand new Susie. You just haven't been paying attention. And so if you keep in mind that your spouse, that life circumstances and trials and tribulations are going to come along and they're going to cause your spouse to evolve just like you're evolving, then it'll keep the freshness.
And when you're not doing that and not paying attention, these are the ones where you hear about the marriages that failed after 25 years.
Wow. Right.
These are how these marriages fail, because they're not paying attention as the individuals are changing, and as they start going through these different stages of life.
Right.
They become empty nesters, and all of a sudden the children aren't gone, so you don't have anybody to focus on.
Right.
And then when you got to focus on each other, it's like, who are you?
Right.
Who is this person I've been living with for the last 25 years? And that happened because circumstances, the children, and no one took the time in that relationship between the two spouses to say, hey, we need time, because we're so busy doing other things.
Right. I think that's so good, but it brings it back to what you guys were talking about. I love this because it brings it back full circle as to why you need to have date night and why when you have date night, we're not talking about the bills and we're not talking about the kids, and we're not talking, not kills. No, we're not going to kill the kids. But we're not talking about the children. We're not talking about bills. We're not talking about the day to day. When we do date night, it's about us getting to know one another so that when we are empty nesters, I can look at you and you can look at me and we can be like, hey, they gone.
It's on now, yes. And it's on now.
I love that. Did you have anything to add? That was excellent, Adrienne. Thank you so much.
Well, now going back to your other question, you were talking about things that hurt intimacy.
Yes, the importance of protecting it.
Now, there are two things that kill intimacy. One is lies, and another is dishonesty, kind of along the same line.
Right.
But that tends to kill because that breaks down trust. And if you don't trust, it's hard to be intimate with somebody that you don't trust.
Right.
And in infidelity, that's where that tends to come in. Lies and distrust come in. So, and you're not, there's no intimacy. Intimacy goes out. So you want to keep intimacy in, but lies and dishonesty moves it out. So, I mean, you're not going to be intimate with someone that you can't trust.
Now, I'm going to use from me, right? And you guys kind of help. For me, yes, I agree with you absolutely. To be dishonest and to outright lie, whether it's a little white lie or you omitted important information. Yes, that tends to kind of put a monkey wrench in the whole machine. Another one, I think, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. I think another thing that would destroy intimacy and would destroy that trust is betrayal of confidence. Because if I share something with you at an incredibly vulnerable moment, and then you turn around and you use that against me in any way, shape, or form, we're fighting, and you come out with, and that's why your mama didn't buy you the Barbie when you were 5. And I'm using something that's pretty benign and silly, but in those moments when that trust is destroyed, does that I think the better question is, how does that impact the intimacy that was built up?
Before a man, if that happens, he tends to shut down, and he's not going to open up and open up his heart and say, things that are really in his heart. Because if it's trampled or whacked or whatever you want to call it, he's going to pull back again. So if you have your husband that is opening up, you never want to step on what he's saying or slash what he's saying or beat down what he has said, because he's opened up to you, so you want to keep that door open. You don't want to shut it.
Okay, that's really good. Adrienne?
And it is likewise for women too, that it's important that whatever they feel comfortable and they have a safe space to express themselves. And what better safe place to express yourself than with your spouse,
right?
Who becomes your very best friend.
Right.
So being able to share your most intimate feelings and emotions with them is very important for her to be able to trust you in that area. So those things are really, really, really important, because if a woman is shattered, likewise, she's going to shut down.
Right.
And she's not going to give to you what you need because she's done. And so it's really important for you to be sensitive to one another.
Right.
And don't use those things at them.
Right.
Don't throw those things back at them. And one thing that I always can encourage is if they're sharing something with you and you couldn't handle it, well, then you really need to seek God. Because you might say to your spouse, I want to know your heart. Are you sure you want to know?
Right.
There could be some things back there in the past that you may not be able to handle.
Right.
So you need to be prepared to be able to receive that and not hold anything against them.
That's excellent. That is
Anything.
excellent.
You don't hold it against them, because it's important for them as well that you sensitive to their needs and sensitive to what they have to say, and creating that safe place for them to say it.
That's excellent. We are going to take a break for station identification. When we come back, we want to talk about how to rebuild it when it's shattered. So, either it's you use it against them, or, we're going to touch on this really quick before we go. Or, you know what, we'll talk about when we come back. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just really excited and I need to watch my time. We want to talk about when you're pouring your heart out and you find out the other person isn't even listening, because that does happen in marriage, and how you recover from that. So we'll be back in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to become a guest on the Simone Edwards Show? Well, please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
All right, we are back here in studio with the Nears. I apologize, you guys. I just get so excited and there's so many questions and so little time. Okay, so how do you, before we get to rebuilding and recovering, what happens when you get to that place where, Adrienne, you're pouring your heart out and you're telling him about that thing that just, and I can't wait to get home and tell him, and you find out, like, he's not even listening. Or, Kenneth, you are pouring your heart out about something that's really important to you, and you realize, you look over and there's kind of that, like, blank stare. She took off and went to Vegas without you. She's walking around in the Mandalay or something. And you're there by yourself.
That's a good analogy.
Daydreaming.
So, how do you recover from that? How do you stay engaged? What happens when, what do you do to make sure that you secure those intimate moments and you don't destroy them? That's one. And then two, tell us how to recover when we have destroyed intimacy.
Okay, I'm going to start out with what I've been talking about is creating a safe place.
Right.
Sometimes it is not always the best time to have that conversation.
Right.
And we need to, as adults, be able to hold some things back. And one thing that we encourage is that you have your husband and wife meetings, and it's once a week, and it's for 1 hour, so that you're creating that safe place to discuss. It doesn't have to be about bills, and it doesn't have to be about those things about the children, because some people don't have children. Sometimes the issues are not bills, and sometimes you just need to talk about everyday life,
Right.
and some things that are concerning you.
That's good.
That's creating that safe space for you got a whole hour.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not always for them to solve anything.
That's good.
It's just to listen and be heard.
That's really good.
And so it's creating that safe space, so that you can do that. There's been times, though, husband and wife meeting, couldn't wait. So I have to let him know, communicate. I got something I really need to talk to you about. Am I going to get, can we talk this evening?
Mm-hmm.
And it's either, basketball game is on. Be considerate of the time that's what they like to do. Lifetime movie coming on that I want to watch. Okay, be considerate of that time of what they want to do. That helps relaxes them, because it's better to discuss it when they can listen and receive or give you that undivided attention so that you are being heard, than to force it.
That's really good. We want to segue really quick to explain why we were laughing. So Adrienne says, basketball game is on. And Kenneth is like, yeah, he's nodding. Basketball game. She says, Lifetime movie. His head drops and he just starts shaking his head. The tight lip comes in.
So you know where the spot is.
But back to what you were saying, you brought up some really good points about being a grown-up and being an adult and not, I have to talk to you right now, and being respectful. I really, really love the fact that you said, be respectful of the fact that if you know your spouse loves a particular sport or a particular show and it's coming on, don't make them sacrifice it in that moment if you can wait an hour or 2 hours to have the conversation or pick another time when you'll have their undivided attention. I really like that. That was a really excellent point. And I just want to reiterate before we have Kenneth pick up. At no point are we talking about our issues on date night.
Right.
No.
Never.
Never.
We never discuss our issues.
Never.
So we're not
Never.
going to go to somebody pick a restaurant. Ruth Chris.
Chris.
All right. Oh, my program manager said Ruth Chris, a girl after my own heart. So we're not going to get dressed up, put on our very best, smell our very best, go to Ruth Chris and talk about. And then let me tell you something. That's not the time for that. We're going to have our husband and wife meetings once a week. And that's when we're going to address the issues. And if it's really pressing, we're going to find that off meeting and we're going to call an emergency meeting and we're going to have the president and his board come in and we're going to discuss it then, but never on date night.
Never on date night. And you know, one of the boundaries that we also set is when we're on vacation, no.
Love it.
We do not. That's our time to have fun, enjoy one another, and have our laughs and do what we're going to do. We're on vacation. And we cruise a lot. And there's a good thing to the cruising because, number one, your phones don't work. So no one can reach you.
Right.
They can if there's an emergency, of course.
Right.
But for the most part, you're separated from from work, from kids, from family. You're separated yourself from all of that to totally enjoy one another and rejuvenate your relationship.
So that
with
means
each other.
you're not talking about job?
We're not talking about the job.
We're not talking about church?
We ain't talking about church.
We're not talking about them bad kids?
No, we ain't talking
No.
about the bad kids.
We're not talking about the neighbors?
No, we're not talking about the neighbors.
What about the plumbing?
No.
You know, the gardener came by the other day and I think it's a new guy.
No.
We're not talking about that?
No.
We're just having fun.
That's
Yep.
it.
We're being silly.
Yep.
We're being like grown-up kids.
Yes.
We might even jump on the hotel room bed just cause.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, we're having fun.
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 I love it.
And that's what's most important in that relationship is that you learn how to laugh with one another and have fun with one another. Then set the time aside to talk about those other things. And the other thing that's really good about setting time aside to do it is that you're not bombarded.
Right.
I am not bombarding him when I hit that door
Right.
with all kinds of issues. I'm not bombarding him. And he is not bombarding me. Yeah, he might be a little bit more talkative because he didn't talk to anybody all day.
Right.
Well, that's different. But I'm not bombarding him with things, and he's not bombarding me with things. And so, and it really helps in the relationship and relieves a lot of stress off of the both of you.
Right.
So your home is a lot more peaceful. There's a time and a place for everything. And we need to respect that in our relationships.
That's really good. Kenneth?
Now, when you're talking about the basketball game and that time, now, if you say, well, I want 2 hours to watch this basketball game, okay, I'm going to watch this basketball game, but when that time comes to listen, you have to have your ear there to listen because you gave your word. So you're going to be held to your word, especially as a man. If you promise something, you're going to be held to it.
That's
so
really
don't throw a lot of promises out there that you're not going to be able to keep. You know, so I try not to do a lot of promising, and because if you can't keep it, well, you will be reminded of what you promised that you were going to do. So so that's automatic. You know, so but you have to force your ear to hear. If you said that I'm going to listen to you, or we're going to have this discussion at 9 o'clock, well, you have to, shut it down and have your ear tuned to listen. Because if you're not listening, well, I gave you that time and you promised, and now you're still not listening.
That's a really good point, though, because, and I think that applies to both sides of the aisle. And what came to my mind was, like with a child, when you make a child a promise, you say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That kid is like, it's on lock. You going to do it. I'm not questioning it. Why would you lie to me? And it's the same thing with your spouse. So if a wife makes a promise to her husband, or a husband makes a promise, that person is not expecting you to lie to them. So then when, you come up with a litany of excuses and why you can't do it and why you can get it done, or, I wasn't going to do all that and all that other stuff, those are the things that erode at the intimacy that you work so hard to build up. So before we leave this platform of intimacy, if we get to leave, because this may be what our listeners need to hear, how do you build it back up? Because we talked about how to get it, right? We talked about how to build it up and how to secure it. And then we talked about the things that can erode it, that can kind of have you in the negative, if we use the bank account analogy, right? So now you're overdrawn and you don't have anything. How do you get it back to zero and then start to build it back up? What is involved on both sides of the aisle?
Well, one thing that does have to happen is that whatever the issue was that broke it down, you need to make sure that issue was on the table, in that you did discuss it clearly and both of you did express how you clearly felt about it.
Right.
And that you're properly heard. And then at that point, you've got to be willing to forgive.
Okay.
Unforgiveness in a relationship will destroy it faster than anything. And so at that point, when you're ready to open yourself up to forgive for whatever has happened, because it's been out on the table, you've discussed it, and you've agreed, well, I'm going to forgive you. And if you say that you're going to do that, make sure you're able to do that. And so that's really one of the tools in starting to build. And the other thing is accountability. Whatever destroyed it, you need to be accountable in part of building it back up. If it was infidelity, then when the cell phone rings, you need to answer it. There's no secret messages. There's no secret conversation at another part of the house. So you need to be accountable for your actions and your whereabouts. And on top of, and then with that, you need to be honest.
Excellent points, all of them.
Honest. You need to be really honest about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it, and communicate it. And make sure that it is heard. Your spouse hears it, sees it.
Really good points. When we come back from break, Kenneth, we're going to let you get into the driver's seat. We're going to let you drive the bus on this part.
Okay.
What I want to say for the both of you, though, is I heard you say about forgiveness, and I think that's really great. But I'm going to be devil's advocate. Forgiveness is awesome. What about the times, what about the responsibility of the person who broke the trust to then, I think a lot of times we think if we add water, if I say I'm sorry and you say I forgive you, then we have a blank slate and we're good to go. And I think that there is you kind of have to, part of building back trust is going to require consistency.
Yes.
It's not just, I said I'm sorry, you said you forgave me, let's just forget about it and move on. Come on, grow up and get over it. It's no, now I need to see you be consistent. So I want you guys to talk about that when we get back. Okay, Kenneth, you're going to drive. Adrienne, we're going to have you pick up, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Do you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's show? Would you like to share your testimony or any constructive critiques? Would you like to know how to become a guest on the Simone Edwards Show? Well, please feel free to email us at thesimoneedwardsshow@gmail.com. We are also available on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Be sure to follow us to receive updates regarding the show and our other ministries.
All right, we are back here in studio with the Nears of Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries. Just a quick shout out. If you would like to connect with them directly, you can reach them via Facebook. It is Perfecting Love Marriage Ministries. You can find them on Facebook. You can also email them at perfectingloveisluv@gmail.com. You can reach out to Adrienne or Kenneth Nears. I have known them for quite some time. They are amazing people. I consider them my big brother, big sister. So when that time comes for me, I know who I'll be going to. So we're back here in studio, and we're going to let Kenneth drive, and we're going to pick up with the issue of consistency when trust is broken to rebuild. What needs to happen to rebuild?
First thing, you need to commit to changing the behavior that you had when that
that's
happened.
good.
You got to be committed to change. And that change is going to be, you're going to have to be accountable for your time and for your whereabouts, and you got to be accountable for your telephone. That's usually where most of the problem lies.
Right.
Or the internet time. You have to be accountable for that.
Right.
And you're going to be questioned about where you've been and how long you've been there. Those are just things that are just going to happen when the trust is broken.
Right.
And infidelity, mainly. So you have to get ready for that. I mean, husband or wife, whichever one. So you have to be accountable. For where you are. Because prior to that, you were not accountable. So that's how you had the time to do what you did.
Right.
And most of the time it was a lot of lies told in there, because it's hard to have an affair and you didn't tell any lies. So most of the time you had to have lied a pretty good amount of times to be able to pull that off.
Right.
So, and you have to tell the truth because one lie takes you right back to that infidelity. So you cannot be lying. You have to be honest. You have to be telling the truth, and your whereabouts. You have to be time conscious. Don't let your phone die. We had one situation that we were counseling with a couple, and his phone died. He had an affair and his phone died, and his wife hit the ceiling. But honestly, his phone died. But you just have to make sure that don't happen. Because it's going to take you right back to that same spot. But you have to be accountable for your time, and that's usually the number one issue: is where are you? How long you're going to be, and make a phone call, and if you're, if you're questioned, you can't get upset over that, because you were the one that broke the trust, so
Right.
you just have to deal with whatever comes, you made that decision, and these are the consequences, so you have to deal with that.
I absolutely love that you said that, because that's where the whole consistency issue comes in. Mm-hmm. Because I've heard people say things like, oh, well, he needs to give me a break, or she needs to give me a break because I'm trying. And it's like, they don't see that I'm trying X, Y, and Z. And the question comes in, well, how do you define trying? Is it 1 or 2 times? And, you're expecting the Macy's Day Parade to take place? You know what I mean? So I love the fact that you said, well, no. The person who broke the trust, the person who damaged the relationship, is going to be responsible. Now, we are, unlike Fox News, we are going to be fair and balanced. So let's talk about the flip side of that with the person who is trying and they are really making an effort, but they're kind of always beaten down. Let's talk about how to get that balance in the relationship.
You have to be open.
Mm-hmm.
If you were the one that you have to participate in helping to build that trust.
Right.
So you have to be open, and your heart open to accept. And that goes along with forgiving. When you are forgiving them, you're going to be open to, you can't just beat them down.
Right.
Because you're never going to get anywhere.
Right.
And that's in any type of relationship. It's the forgiveness end of it is left up to the individual.
Right.
So as hard as that other person might be trying
Mm-hmm.
and being as consistent as they can be consistent, and you're not being open and willing to forgive them so that you can move forward, you're going to be stuck.
That's good.
And that's going to stick the relationship. So, one thing that I, in a lot of things in my own life experiences, not only in Kenneth is my first marriage, second marriage, I'm sorry. Not only things that happened in my first marriage, but even things in just relationships and friendships. I have to be open and willing to forgive. And I had gone through so many different things and deep hurt because God showed me my unwillingness to forgive. And as soon as I was able to open up and forgive, I'm really quick to forgive because I ask God for a heart of forgiveness. And so when someone says that they are sorry, I'm going to forgive you and we're going to move on. Not everybody is that way, but you have to keep your heart open.
That's good.
Not to be trampled on, but your heart open to receive what they are doing and to accept what they are doing. Because if you don't, you're not ever going to see it, and it's never going to benefit your relationship at all on any level.
That's really good. That's excellent advice. So we kind of hit it really hard, right? And we praise God because for those of you who are tuning in and listening, we actually pray before we start every show and we ask God to lead and guide us. And so this is the course and the road that he took us down. And so we kind of came out the gate swinging, right? Both guns blazing. And we were talking about infidelity. So let's address the couples that they don't have the infidelity issue, but they do have I shared with you something really personal and you used it against me. And that really hurt the intimacy. How do they rebuild? We set aside time and I was really sharing with you my heart. And I look over and you checked out and you were in Vegas somewhere and you missed the last 15 minutes. In the last 15 minutes, I was really pouring my heart out just to find out that I was talking to a brick wall. How do you recover from that?
Again, we go back to creating a safe place.
Right.
And you create that safe place and respect that time so that when you've created that space, you can have that conversation and pour out. If they checked out in that last 15 minutes, they really need to ask you need to communicate this and you need to ask for forgiveness so that we can have this conversation again. Communicate. We don't know unless you've said it.
Right.
So if he's just too sleepy to finish hearing my hour of pour out so that he doesn't get in trouble or she doesn't get in trouble,
right.
It's best for the communication. Communicate.
Right.
We're sitting right here. The two of us, we're sitting right here. Honey, can we finish this conversation? Hold up. Respect that. Because if it's important for you to be heard, it's important to keep that safe place.
That's good.
So you want to always keep that in mind. And it doesn't have to be a pour out for an hour. We're just using an hour because an hour can be a long time. Sometimes you can spill how you feel in 15, 20 minutes, especially if you're a woman.
Right.
A woman we've already processed it, blam. And so a man, it might take him a little bit longer, but for us, so he may not have to pay attention for very long.
Right.
But a woman might have to pay attention for a whole lot longer.
Right.
And it's important because you don't want to shut him down. So when you create that safe place, be prepared to listen and pay attention.
Okay.
So that they can be heard.
That's really good. Kenneth?
Because you have to give that ear. That ear has to be there because I want to be heard. So it's very important that I'm heard. So if I can't hear her at that time, I will say, well, like, if I'm getting ready to go to sleep. Can we do this, tomorrow at such and such a time or in the morning or something? But it's important to be able to give that ear because there are times that, Adrienne has a high stress job. So I have to be able to listen to her when she gets in. When the stress level gets too high, so she has to pour out. So, and sometimes I'm saying, oh, gee, but you have to train your ear to hear. keep listening, because it's very important to your spouse, because if you check out, that's hurtful. To me, that's hurtful, because if I'm pouring out my heart, if I'm talking to you and expecting a response, I want you to hear me, and respond back. If I'm asking you something, respond back. Not be texting or on the phone or on the computer. What'd you say? No. I mean, you should be listening to me.
Right.
So you have to give that ear. Especially as a husband, because if your wife is not being heard, you got some problems. Because you hear you just listen to me, just listen to me, just listen to me. You hear that all the time.
Right.
So just listen. I'm listening to you. I'm listening. So don't panic. You got my ear. I'm listening to you.
I liked what the both of you said. That was really, really good, by the way. Thank you so much. I liked what the both of you said as far as each of you mentioned from both sides of the aisle. I'm going to need a minute. Can we pick this up a little bit later? I'm going to need a minute. Can we pick this up a little bit later? Which means the other spouse has to be open to saying, okay, let's talk about this tomorrow. Or, okay, let's talk about this next week. Or, okay, because I think sometimes what happens is, okay, can we talk about this a little bit later? And it's no. This is my time. I got the talking stick. It's my turn to say stuff. It's my turn.
Right up the stick.
It's my turn to say
Talking stick.
stuff. Shoot. Right? So it's a matter of being respectful. If you want them to listen, be respectful of the fact that they may be really stressed out in Adrienne's case, or really tired in Kenneth's case, and vice versa. And they want to listen to you, but they're not going to be able to actively listen at that moment. And you may miss some really good stuff. So we have come to the end of our time. I know, boys and girls, we have come to the end of the line. It's so sad. But the great news is we'll be back in studio with the Nears. We'll be back in studio with them again. They are here once a month. We may have a special treat depending on their schedule. We may have a special treat and we may be able to get them in a little bit sooner, but if not, we'll definitely be back. We have so much more to discuss on the top 10 biggest complaints about marriage. So we pray that you would tune in. We hope that what you've heard today about intimacy, how to get it, how to rebuild it, how to keep it flourishing and growing. We hope that what you have heard has blessed you today. And we look forward to the next time we'll be able to visit with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Simone Edwards Show. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions or comments, please feel free to email them to the Simone, Simone, Edwards Show at gmail.com. That is the Simone Edwards Show, Edwards Show at gmail.com. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care and bye-bye.